At our wedding rehearsal, she whispered, "I don't love you anymore." The next day, she married my best friend. I am a man of 32. At our wedding rehearsal, standing at the altar with everyone watching, my fiancée leaned in with a perfect smile on her face and whispered in my ear that she didn't love me anymore. I smiled back like an idiot, because I thought I had misheard her, and I was too scared to ask her to repeat it in front of my family and friends. Her lipstick brushed my cheek as she pulled away. The photographer snapped a picture at that exact second, catching me half smiling, half frozen, while she laughed and turned toward the guests. From the back rows, it probably looked like some intimate joke between two people about to get married. For me, it felt like someone had cut a cable inside my chest. The pastor told us to walk back down the aisle and try the entrance again. The bridesmaids clapped. The groomsmen laughed and made small jokes. My best friend, Ethan, stood at my side, grinning like always. My mother wiped a tear from her eye, already emotional. My father filmed everything on his phone like he always did, saying he wanted behind-the-scenes footage. None of them knew that the bride had just told me, under her breath, that she didn't love me. Her name is Claire. We met 6 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday party. I was standing in the kitchen holding a plastic cup, talking to nobody in particular, when she walked in carrying a homemade cake. It was too big, slightly lopsided, and covered with way too many strawberries. Everyone made a big deal about the cake, but she just laughed and said she liked doing too much. She had that kind of energy. Loud, bright, always the center of attention without asking. I was the opposite. I worked in IT support, quiet and invisible most of the time. I had one real friend, Ethan, who I'd known since middle school. He was the social one. The funny one. The guy who talked us into trouble and then somehow talked us out of it. Growing up, people used to joke that he was the main character and I was the sidekick. It bothered me sometimes, but it also felt better than being alone. Ethan was the one who pushed me to talk to Claire that night. He nudged me forward and said I should offer to cut the cake with her. I was sure she would ignore me. Instead, she asked my name, asked what I did, and actually listened. She laughed at my bad jokes, and when I apologized for talking too much, she said she liked that I was real and not trying to impress her. We started dating. It was slow at first. Cheap dinners, long walks, Netflix on my old couch. She loved making plans, lists, goals. I loved how she made my small life feel bigger. Ethan hung out with us a lot. At the time, it made sense. He was my best friend, I wanted my friend and my girlfriend to get along. We went bowling, played board games, did Sunday brunches. They teased me about being serious and quiet, but in a friendly way. Over time, Claire and Ethan developed their own banter. Inside jokes. Shared references. Sometimes I'd walk into the room and find them laughing about something from a group chat I wasn't in. It bothered me, but I pushed it down. It felt petty to question two people I loved enjoying each other's company. I told myself this was what real adult friendships looked like. 3 years into the relationship, I proposed. I had saved up for months for the ring. Nothing insane, but more than I'd ever spent on anything other than my car. I took her to the park where we had our first date, somehow got through a shaky little speech, and asked her to marry me. She cried, said yes, and then immediately asked Ethan to take our picture when I told her he was hiding nearby. I thought it was sweet that she wanted him to be part of it. Now, when I look back, it feels like the first sign that this story was never just about me and her. The first year of the engagement was mostly good. We talked about venues, colors, food. She made Pinterest boards and spreadsheets. I picked suits and looked at our bank account. My parents offered to help a bit. Hers did too. We still needed to cover a big portion of the costs ourselves, but we were managing. I dropped small hints about wanting something simple. She insisted on one big day, just once. I compromised because that's what you do when you think you're building a life with someone. Then things started to shift. It was subtle at first. She became more impatient with me, especially when I was tired from work. She compared me more often to other people, especially Ethan. She'd say things like, "Ethan would know what to say here," or, "You and Ethan are so different with people, I wish you'd learn from him." It always ended with a half laugh, like it was a joke. It didn't feel like one. Ethan, for his part, was always there. At least, that's how it looked. If Claire needed something heavy lifted, he offered. If she needed help organizing the wedding DJ or dealing with suppliers, he had a friend he could call. If I forgot something, he remembered. When Claire said I wasn't enthusiastic enough about certain details, Ethan stepped in and hyped her up. I tried to be grateful. I also started to feel like a guest at my own wedding. A decision would be made in a group chat I wasn't in, then presented to me as a fun surprise. When I raised an eyebrow, Claire would accuse me of being negative. When I tried to talk to Ethan about it, he said I was overthinking and that I should chill out and trust the process. A few months before the wedding, I noticed Claire was on her phone a lot more. Late at night, early in the morning, always with the screen tilted slightly away from me. When I walked into a room, she'd sometimes lock it and say she was just scrolling. Once, she laughed at something and said, "Ethan is such an idiot," then quickly changed the subject. It felt wrong, but I didn't want to be the paranoid fiancé who accuses his partner of cheating because of a text. Ethan and I had been friends for 20 years. There are people you suspect and people you don't. He was in the second category. Still, small things piled up. She started criticizing me more openly. She told me I was too comfortable in my job, that I had no ambition, that she felt like she was dragging me forward. She compared my salary to Ethan's new consulting gig, saying he was killing it while I stayed in the same place. She talked about wanting to travel, to move to a bigger city, to change her life. Every time I couldn't match her energy, she pulled away a little more. I thought it was wedding stress. People say weddings bring out the worst in everyone. I told myself we just had to push through the planning phase and things would calm down afterward. I could handle criticism. I just didn't want to lose her. 2 weeks before the wedding, we had our biggest fight. It started with something stupid, flowers, I think, and ended with her saying she felt like she was marrying a roommate. That one hurt. I asked her if she wanted to cancel the wedding. She broke down crying and said no, she loved me, she was just overwhelmed. We made up, but something in me stayed tense after that. Now back to the rehearsal. The church was full of people who loved us, or said they did. My parents, her parents, friends from school, colleagues, cousins. The rehearsal was supposed to be fun. The pastor made little jokes about walking too fast. The musician tested the sound system. I stood at the altar in my shirt and tie, sweating under the lights, watching Claire walk up the aisle in a white dress she'd chosen just for the rehearsal. Not the wedding dress, but still something special. She looked like a magazine cover. Everyone said so. She reached me, took my hands, and held them perfectly. She smiled at the pastor, then at the guests, then leaned in as if to whisper something romantic in my ear. I smelled her perfume and felt myself relax for half a second. That's when she said it. "I don't love you anymore," she whispered, voice calm and steady. "But smile." I froze. My brain refused to process the words. I thought maybe she'd said something else and I'd misheard. Or maybe it was some weird joke. I glanced at her face. She was still smiling, eyes bright, like a bride in a movie. Nobody around us noticed anything. She gave my hands a little squeeze, as if to say, "Don't you dare react." We walked through the motions. The pastor told us when to turn, where to stand, how to face each other. People laughed and clapped at the right moments. Inside, I felt like I was underwater. After the rehearsal, everyone moved downstairs to the reception hall for drinks and snacks. I followed on autopilot. People came up to me, slapped my back, told me how lucky I was. I nodded and said thank you because that's what my mouth knew how to do. My mother asked if I was okay because I looked pale. I said I was just tired. I caught Claire in the side corridor near the bathrooms, away from the noise. I grabbed her arm, gently but firmly, and asked her what she had whispered at the altar. I needed her to say it again, clearly, in a place where I could react. She looked me straight in the face and repeated it like she was commenting on the weather. She said she didn't love me anymore. She said it felt wrong to go through with the wedding. She said she had been trying to talk herself into it for months but couldn't do it anymore. Then she said something that made my stomach twist worse than anything else. She said she cared about me too much to lie to my face during the vows. I asked her why she waited until the day before the wedding to tell me. She shrugged and said there was never a good moment. Work, stress, family expectations, money already spent. I asked her if there was someone else. She hesitated just long enough for me to notice, then said it wasn't about another man, it was about her life. My brain immediately filled in the blank anyway. If it wasn't someone, it would be soon. I asked if she had told anyone else. She said no. Not yet. Then she told me, almost gently, that we should probably still go through with the dinner that evening because people were already here, and she didn't want to ruin the weekend. She suggested we tell everyone after the wedding weekend that we had mutually decided to postpone. She said it calmly, like we were talking about moving a dentist appointment. I stared at her, shocked by how controlled she was while I was falling apart inside. I told her I couldn't stand in front of everyone tomorrow and pretend everything was fine. She rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic. She said I always made things bigger than they were. That's when Ethan walked around the corner. He saw us, saw my face, and immediately came over. He asked what was going on, if everything was okay. Before I could answer, Claire said we were just talking about pre-wedding nerves. She laughed, touched my arm, and walked back toward the main room like nothing had happened. I grabbed Ethan's sleeve and pulled him back. I asked him if she had said anything to him about not wanting to get married. He looked uncomfortable and said she had been stressed, but that was normal. He told me not to overthink, that all couples freak out before the big day. He gave me the same line everyone gives in movies. I wanted to believe him. I also saw in his eyes that he knew more than he was saying. He told me to take a breath, to enjoy the evening, to talk to her later when we were both calmer. He said, "Don't blow up your whole life over a rehearsal panic." Then he hugged me, slapped my back, and walked off to get another drink. The rehearsal dinner was a blur. I barely remember what we ate. I remember the speeches. My father talked about how proud he was. Claire's dad told an embarrassing story from her childhood. Ethan gave a toast about our friendship, about how he'd seen me grow from a shy teenager into a man ready to build a family. Everyone laughed. I sat there feeling like I was watching my own life happen to someone else. Claire played her role perfectly. She laughed in the right places, kissed my cheek when people clinked glasses, held my hand under the table. If you looked from the outside, you would have thought we were the happiest couple in the room. Only I knew that the hand I was holding belonged to someone who had already emotionally left. That night, after everyone went home, we went back to the apartment we had rented for the weekend near the venue. It was supposed to be our place for the wedding. Claire immediately went into the bathroom to remove her makeup. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my shoes on the floor. When she came out, I asked her again if she meant it. She didn't apologize. She didn't take it back. She just said she didn't want to start a marriage with a lie. She said she had tried to convince herself that comfort was enough, that loyalty could replace passion, but she couldn't do it. She said she respected me too much to cheat on me later. That last part felt like a punch. It implied that cheating would have been inevitable if she stayed. I asked her directly if there was someone specific she wanted to be with. She looked away and said it wasn't about a name. My brain shouted Ethan's name anyway, because he was the one who was always there, the one she compared me to, the one who understood her ambition. We argued. I cried. She stayed surprisingly calm. At one point, she said something that made me feel physically sick. She said if I really loved her, I'd let her go and not make a scene tomorrow. She said people didn't need to know the details. They just needed a clean story. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling while she slept on the other side of the bed, turned away from me. At some point, I heard her phone vibrate. She reached for it, typed something, and put it back. I saw the screen light up for a second and caught a glimpse of a name. Ethan. The next morning, I woke up with that name burned into my brain. I checked my own phone. Messages from my mother, my father, guests, asking if I needed help with anything. A message from Ethan saying he'd be at the venue early to check on things. No message from Claire, even though she was in the same room. She got dressed in silence and left early, to go to the salon with the girls. Before she walked out, she turned and said we'd talk after the wedding weekend. Not after the wedding. After the weekend. It was a small difference, but it told me she had already deleted the ceremony from her mind. I sat on the edge of the bed again and suddenly realized I had a choice. I could go through the motions, show up at the church, pretend everything was fine, let her decide when and how she would break our engagement. Or I could refuse to be the extra in my own story one more time. My hands were shaking when I called the pastor. I told him the wedding was off. He sounded stunned, then serious. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. He said he would inform the staff. He asked if I wanted him to make an announcement to the guests when they arrived, or if I wanted to talk to them myself. I said I'd be there. Then I called my parents. My mother cried and asked what had happened. I told her Claire had changed her mind. My father went silent for a long moment, then said he was coming to get me. I told him I'd meet them at the church. I didn't call Claire. I didn't call Ethan. I wanted to see their faces when they realized the script had changed. By the time I arrived at the church, cars were already lined up. Guests in suits and dresses stood in small groups outside, confused. Some checked their phones, reading messages about a delay. My father pulled me aside and asked me if I wanted to leave. I said no. For once in my life, I wanted to stand there and face the mess directly, not from a corner. The pastor cleared his throat and asked for everyone's attention. He announced that the ceremony was cancelled. He said there had been a change, refused to get into details, and asked people to respect our privacy. Immediately, people started murmuring. Some looked at me with pity. Some looked for Claire. She arrived 10 minutes later, in a car with her maid of honor. When she stepped out and saw the crowd already standing outside, you could see the confusion on her face. When she saw my expression, something like panic flashed in her eyes. She walked up to me, her hair half done, makeup in progress, wearing a light dress she'd put on for prep. She demanded to know what I had done. I told her calmly that I had done what she wanted. I had cancelled the wedding. She looked around at the guests and hissed that I had humiliated her in front of everyone. I told her she had humiliated me when she whispered that she didn't love me anymore at the altar and then expected me to smile and play along. There was no point denying it now, people were close enough to hear us. My mother put a hand on her mouth. My father just stared. Claire went pale, then red. She said I was being cruel, that everyone gets nervous, that she didn't mean it like that. I told her I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life wondering when my wife would finally follow her feelings and leave. If she needed to go, she was free. Just not as my wife. Ethan pushed his way through the crowd right then, eyes wide, tie crooked. He asked what was going on. Claire spun on him and demanded to know if he knew I'd cancelled. He said no, he'd just found out from someone in the parking lot. For a second, the three of us stood there, me, the man who thought he was getting married, her, the woman who had already emotionally walked away, and him, the best friend in the middle who looked like he'd just been handed someone else's bomb. She looked at him in a way I had seen 100 times before but never fully understood. A look that said, "Fix this." He opened his mouth, probably to play mediator again. But for the first time, I didn't let him. I told them both that we were done. I told Claire she could keep the dress, the decorations, the plans, whatever she wanted. I didn't care anymore. I told Ethan I needed space and that I didn't know when or if I'd speak to him again. Then I turned around and walked away, leaving them standing in front of the church we were supposed to enter together. People stared. Some tried to stop me. My father followed. My mother cried. We got in the car and drove off while the guests slowly started to disperse. It was messy, humiliating, painful. It was also the first decision I'd made entirely for myself in a long time. I thought that was the worst of it. I thought canceling the wedding at the last second would be the hardest part of this story. I didn't know yet that the next day, the woman who whispered that she didn't love me and the man who had called himself my best friend for 20 years would walk into a civil office together and come out married. The evening after the cancelled wedding felt like a blackout. We went back to my parents' house because I couldn't face the empty apartment I'd been preparing for married life. My mother fussed over me, trying to feed me. My father sat at the table with a beer in his hand, looking like he wanted to say something but didn't know where to start. People called and texted all afternoon. Some were supportive, saying they were proud of me for not going through with it if she didn't love me. Others were more careful, asking if I was sure I hadn't overreacted. A few hinted that maybe I should have talked it out instead of canceling. Everyone had an opinion. Only a handful knew the exact sentence she'd whispered in my ear. I turned my phone off eventually. I couldn't handle the constant buzzing. I lay on my childhood bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The cake at the party where we met. The evenings with Ethan joking between us. The rehearsal, her breath on my ear. The look in her eyes when she realized I'd taken the decision away from her by canceling on my terms. Sometime around midnight, I turned my phone back on. There were dozens of messages. Claire had sent me a few long ones, saying she never meant to hurt me this way, that she felt ambushed, that she was processing. Ethan had sent shorter ones, "Call me, we need to talk, don't do anything stupid." I didn't answer any of them. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My eyes burned, my throat hurt, and my body felt heavy. I checked my phone again. There were fewer messages now. People had moved on to their Sunday routines. I thought maybe I could start thinking about my own next step, canceling vendors, returning rentals, figuring out what to do about the apartment lease. Then my cousin Sam called. Sam isn't dramatic. He's the kind of person who sends one-word texts and calls only when something really matters. When I saw his name, I answered immediately. His voice was weird, too calm, like he was trying not to set off an alarm. "Are you home?" he asked. "At my parents'," I said. "Why?" He hesitated. "Don't freak out," he said, which, of course, made my stomach drop. "I just saw something you should probably know before you see it from someone else." I sat up in bed. "What?" He told me that one of Claire's bridesmaids had posted a picture on her private Instagram story, probably thinking only close friends would see it. Sam's girlfriend was in that circle and had shown it to him. The picture was taken in front of the civil office in town. The caption said something like, "When love finds a way anyway, clinking glasses." In the photo, standing side by side with big smiles, were Claire and Ethan. Both dressed nicely. Both holding what looked like official documents. I felt the blood drain from my face. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I asked him to repeat it. He did. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was delivering a diagnosis. "They got married?" I asked, my voice sounding far away. "It looks like it," he said softly. "I'm sorry, man." I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it. My hand shook so much I almost dropped the phone. I thanked him for telling me. I hung up, opened Instagram with shaky fingers, and checked. I wasn't in that private circle anymore, of course. Claire had removed me from everything as soon as the wedding was cancelled, but the internet always has cracks. Another friend sent me the screenshot a few minutes later, with a long, "I'm so sorry," attached. There they were. Claire in a simple white dress, Ethan in a suit I recognized from his closet. Her hair was fully done now, makeup perfect. She was holding a bouquet, smaller than the one she'd chosen for our wedding, but still carefully arranged. He had his arm around her waist. They looked happy. Not ashamed, not hesitant. Happy. The timestamp on the story said it had been posted 20 minutes earlier, less than 24 hours after I had cancelled our wedding because she said she didn't love me anymore. She was stepping out of a civil building with a marriage certificate in her hand and my best friend next to her. My first reaction wasn't even anger. It was disbelief. My brain kept trying to come up with an innocent explanation. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was some kind of paperwork for something else. Maybe the caption was misleading. But the longer I stared, the less room there was for denial. My mother knocked on the door. I must have made some kind of noise. She came in, saw my face, and asked what was wrong. I showed her the picture. She covered her mouth and sat down on the bed, shaking her head. "That can't be real," she whispered. But it was. My father came in too, saw the screenshot, and went quiet in a way that scared me more than if he had shouted. He had known Ethan since we were kids. He had joked about him being his second son. Now he was staring at his face next to the woman who was supposed to be my wife. "You don't come back from this," he said eventually. Just that one sentence. The next hours were chaos. People started texting again, but this time the tone was different. Some had just seen the rumors. Others were sending screenshots like they were sharing breaking news. A few asked if it was true. Others didn't ask, they just assumed and wrote long messages about betrayal. I didn't answer anyone. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My chest hurt. My head kept replaying every moment from the last few months with a new filter. Every time Claire had compared me to Ethan. Every time they had exchanged a look. Every time I had walked into a room and they'd gone quiet for a split second. At some point, my phone started ringing non-stop. Ethan. Then Claire. Then her mother. Then a number I didn't know. I let them all ring out. I didn't want to hear any of the excuses I knew they were preparing. In the afternoon, Ethan showed up at my parents' house. He didn't even call first. I saw his car pull into the driveway from the living room window. For a second, I hoped my father would turn him away. But my father looked at me and said, "Do you want to talk to him?" It was my choice. I felt a surge of something, not strength, exactly, but a refusal to keep hiding. I said yes. I wanted to look him in the face when he tried to explain how marrying my ex-fiancée the day after our cancelled wedding was somehow just life happening. He knocked. My mother opened the door but didn't invite him in. He asked if he could talk to me alone. She stepped aside but stayed close enough to hear. I walked into the hallway and saw him standing there in jeans and a shirt, hair still styled from whatever ceremony they'd had. He smelled like cologne and nerves. "Can we go outside?" he asked. "No," I said. "Say whatever you have to say here." He swallowed. "Okay," he said. "Look, I know how this looks." I cut him off. "You married her," I said. "The next day." He winced. "It wasn't planned like that," he said. "Everything moved fast. She was a wreck yesterday after you cancelled. We talked all night. She said she'd been honest with you, that she told you she didn't love you, and you cancelled without giving her a chance to figure things out. She was destroyed. I was. I was there for her. I stared at him. You were there for her at the civil office with a ring? I asked. That's not being there for someone. That's taking my place before the chair is cold. He ran a hand through his hair. We didn't decide it last night, he admitted. We've had feelings for a while. We didn't act on them. We didn't want to hurt you. But yesterday, when everything blew up, it felt like the truth was out anyway. There was no point hiding anymore. He looked me directly in the eyes and said he loved her. He said they didn't want to sneak around. They thought it was better to just make it official. Ripping the bandage off, that's how he phrased it. Like my 10-year friendship and 6-year relationship were a bandage covering a wound that apparently belonged to them. I asked him how long that, while, really was. He admitted they'd been talking about their feelings for at least a few months. He swore they hadn't slept together before the wedding weekend. He said it like that made everything fine. I stared at him, picturing them texting late at night, sharing frustrations about me like I was some project they were collaborating on. I asked him if he had known she didn't love me when he stood next to me at the rehearsal dinner, giving a speech about brotherhood and loyalty. He didn't answer. That was my answer. My father stepped forward then, unable to stay silent any longer. He told Ethan to leave. He told him he'd expected a lot of things from him over the years, mistakes, immaturity, carelessness, but never this. He said taking your best friend's fiancée the day after a cancelled wedding wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate choice. Ethan tried one last line. He said he hoped that one day I'd understand, that love was complicated, that he hadn't set out to hurt me. He said he still cared about me as a brother. That last part made me feel physically sick. I told him I didn't want a brother who could do something like that. I told him not to contact me again. Then I closed the door. Claire tried to reach me too. She sent a long email a few days later when I kept ignoring her calls. She wrote that her feelings for Ethan had grown unexpectedly over the past year, that she had tried to fight them, that she had hoped they would fade. She said canceling the wedding had opened a door to being honest with herself. She insisted they didn't plan to marry the next day, that it had been a crazy, emotional decision made in the middle of pain. She wrote that she genuinely loved me once, that she wouldn't erase our years together, but that our paths had diverged. She said she hoped one day I'd see that they did me a favor by not keeping me in a marriage where I was the second choice. She said she wished me healing. She ended with a line that made my hands clench around the phone. She said she wanted to believe we could all be happy in different ways. I didn't reply. I deleted the email. Then I deleted the bin. The months that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I didn't just lose a fiancé. I lost my best friend, my future plans, my sense of what my own judgment was worth. If you had asked me a year before who I trusted most in the world besides my parents, I would have said Ethan and Claire. Now they were posting pictures together with captions about finding love in unexpected places. People took sides, quietly. Some of our mutual friends stopped texting me. They stayed neutral online, liking posts from both camps, but in reality, they had chosen. Others reached out to me privately and said they were disgusted by what had happened, but they didn't want to cut ties with them either. I learned quickly that I don't want to take sides often really means I don't want to upset the people who hurt you. My parents were my anchor. They let me stay at their house as long as I needed. My father helped me deal with the practical side, canceling vendor contracts, fighting for refunds, closing the joint wedding account. My mother handled the emotional mess in her gentle way, cooking my favorite meals and sitting quietly with me on the couch when I didn't feel like talking. Work was both a distraction and a torture. Some colleagues had seen the wedding invitations on my desk for months. Now I had to show up and pretend everything was normal while slowly telling them, one by one, that the wedding was off. Most people were kind. A few were curious in the wrong way, asking for details like it was gossip. I gave the same simple line every time: we cancelled. She moved on with someone else. I'm focusing on myself now. Therapy helped. My father suggested it, and at first I resisted. I didn't want to sit in a room and explain my heartbreak to a stranger. But eventually, the weight inside me got too heavy. I needed a place to put it. The therapist didn't tell me I was stupid for not seeing it coming. She didn't tell me I should forgive them quickly to move on. She helped me see patterns instead. She pointed out that throughout the relationship, I had always been the one adjusting, shrinking, smoothing things over. Claire and Ethan had taken up more and more space around me, and I had let it happen because I was scared of losing them. She said something that stuck with me: they didn't become selfish overnight. They just finally did something so big you couldn't keep pretending it was small. Slowly, I started reclaiming things that were mine. I moved out of my parents' house and into a small apartment closer to work. I canceled the lease on the place Claire and I were going to share. I deleted old photos from my phone, not because I wanted to erase my past, but because I didn't want my present to be filled with ghosts every time I opened my gallery. There were still setbacks. The first time I saw them together in person after everything, my legs almost gave out. It was at a cafe near downtown. I walked in for a quick coffee and there they were at a corner table, laughing over 2 cups, wedding rings visible. They saw me too. The laughter died. Claire looked guilty. Ethan looked like he wanted to say something. I turned around and walked out before either of them could stand up. One night, about a year after their courthouse wedding, I got a message from an unknown number. It was Claire. She said she was pregnant. She wrote that she wanted me to hear it from her, not from someone else. She said she hoped the news wouldn't hurt me too much and that in some twisted way, she wished it could bring closure, knowing that her life with Ethan was now on a different path entirely. It did hurt. Of course it did. It felt like another nail in the coffin of the future I thought I was going to have. But it also did something else. It made me realize, with painful clarity, that the person she had become by the time of the rehearsal was not someone I wanted to share children with. If she could justify marrying my best friend the day after walking away from our wedding, what else could she justify later, for her truth? As the years went by, the story became less raw. It turned into something people in my wider circle talked about like a dramatic anecdote. You know Alex? His ex-fiancée married his best friend the next day. It sounded like a plot from a TV series. The difference is, TV series end after a season. Real life just keeps going. I dated again eventually. Carefully. Slowly. The first woman I went out with, I told maybe too much, too soon. I watched her expression as I told the story, looking for any sign that she secretly thought I must have done something terrible to deserve it. She just shook her head and said, "You didn't make them selfish." That felt like a small step forward. I'm not going to pretend I became some enlightened, perfectly balanced person. I still have trust issues. When someone laughs a little too much with my friends, something tightens in my chest. When I hear people say, "We can't help who we fall in love with," I feel anger rise. Not because attraction is wrong, but because they use that sentence to excuse anything, as if loyalty is optional. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear her whisper in my ear at the rehearsal. "I don't love you anymore." Smile. That's the part that haunts me more than the courthouse photo. The fact that she wanted me to keep performing a role she had already stepped out of, just to make the story cleaner for her. But there's another memory that sits next to that one in my mind now. It's the moment I stood outside the church the next morning and told the pastor the wedding was off. The moment I looked at her in front of everyone and refused to lie at the altar. The moment I told Ethan I needed space and walked away, even though every part of me was shaking. At our wedding rehearsal, she whispered that she didn't love me anymore and expected me to smile through it. The next day, she married my best friend and expected the world to accept it as true love overcoming obstacles. For a long time, I let their choices define how I saw myself. Not enough, second place, the guy someone leaves for a better story. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see the man who said no. The man who cancelled a wedding built on a lie. The man who refused to stand at an altar with someone who had already picked someone else in her heart. They got exactly what they chose, each other, in a marriage built on betrayal. I got something else, a painful, brutal restart of my life, but this time with my eyes open and my backbone intact.
Follow me for more stories.